righty. Hi, everybody. I wanted to update some of the weather reports that have been given. We are planning on updating regularly on the show now. And what we found is that tomorrow there's not going to be any weather for about 6 hours. There's a repair that's going on in the atmosphere. Now, we just learned about this a short while ago. 6 hours seems to be the maximum. They haven't given us an exact starting time, but we think it's somewhere about 7 in the morning. It could be as little as 4 hours, but again, as many as 6. So there won't be any weather basically anywhere. And then we're told that the weather will continue. They're just not sure what they're going to start and where. So in areas where there has usually been this time of year, perhaps some cold weather, there may, I say may, I don't know for sure, there may be some extremely high temperatures until they get the things sorted out. When it is sorted out, you can expect that wherever you're living, let's say whatever bad kind of weather you're used to, they'll start with that and then bring it moderated so that it's more appropriate for the exact time of year. But bad weather is usually the barometer, no pun intended, of how you set up your weather. If you're going to start from no weather at all, let's just say, as I said, if you're in an area that has 4 seasons or even 3, and you've got a hot summer, you've got a moderate time during the spring or the fall, then you get a cold winter, more than likely you'll either get, when they start the weather up again, you're going to get a very, very hot period or a very cold period. So when it goes to normal, let's say the normal for this time of year where you are is 54 degrees, you still may come in at about 86 to 90 or somewhere around 3 degrees above zero. I'm not responsible for it, but I just wanted to let you know this is a new thing the government is doing. And the government, as you know, usually makes everything better. So prepare for a period of no weather and then, as I said, a lot of weather. Now let's get to some of the regularly scheduled irritating things about life that we cover. If you follow the show at all, you know that we've had periods of time here where we've talked about, of course, the Billy Meier UFOs. We've talked about the prophecies, the predictions, lots of things in the case. And one of the things that is interesting, and I think perhaps people will find this kind of quirky, if you will, Vladimir Putin, the leader of Russia, or he was at least a few minutes ago, probably still is, he is the president, the Russian president, and he is said to have some knowledge of the Meier material. Let's put it that way. We're told in a general sense at very high levels of intelligence in different countries, including Russia, that the people in those services are aware of the Meier contacts and what goes on. Now, I'm not trying to make a direct correlation here by any stretch of the imagination, but a show or two ago, we pointed out some of the foibles of multi-letter acronyms and whatever you call it that are very common these days and very popular as people are having issues being called he or she or this or that. And Putin spoke up about a number of things, and this was sent to me by my friend Greg, and I wanted to actually read this little bit of business here. So Russian President Vladimir Putin issued some typically frank and devastating comments on woke culture, afflicting the West, and particularly the United States, in particular going after new emerging norms on gender discussions, race relations, as well as cancel culture. For our non-viewing audience, I'm making the quote sign, but using single fingers on each hand because that's the way it's printed here. It's like an internal quote within a quote. His wide-ranging assessment was given during the annual Valdai Discussion Club event held in the Black Sea city of Sochi on Thursday. Nice to know. During question and answer interactions with the audience. So and I'm quoting them here, as we previously described, some of his harshest words were in condemnation of NATO's attempts to expand its military infrastructure and presence in Ukraine, sounding familiar, which he said is already underway and poses a real threat. This time it was full quotes here. But later he additionally called out the cultural threat to traditional Russian values posed by the modern West. Now I want to insert something here, because when he is speaking about NATO's attempts to expand its military infrastructure and all that, let's remember that for some time, Billy Meier and Plejaren have warned that the US and NATO and other aspects perhaps of countries not aligned to NATO, I'm not sure, are planning on pushing for a war with Russia, which means also a war with China. That may not turn out to be very productive of anything positive and of survival itself. Now, I'll move on to the next part of this, but I think that Putin knows very well what everybody's up to and is probably better prepared to answer such threats than the West may assume. So, continuing with this little bit of a story, some of his most interesting commentary in this area focused on transgenderism and so-called gender fluidity pushed by the left and accompanying cancellation of any public figure who dares speak against it. Here's a real quote right in here. Those who risk saying that men and women still exist and that this is a biological fact are virtually ostracized. He probably means virtually in every sense of the word, online and elsewhere in the West. And in general, Putin said, virtually ostracized. How about that? He likened what's going on to a, full quote, total phantasmagoria or dreamlike fantasy, according to a translation of his words featured in Russian media. Now, what's also interesting here, as was pointed out when this was sent to me, is that, as some of us already know, and if we don't, we'll about to find out, Billy Meier used that particular word, phantasmagoria, and in a sense, not that at all much differently than Putin did. But let me quote to you from the 1958 letter to all these European countries and all. Billy Meier wrote a rather lengthy number, and yes, a lengthy number of predictions, if you will. And so this one is particularly pertinent for many reasons. And in the third millennium, the time comes when big parts of the continents disappear and the people will have to flee to the mountains, yet their sense of the catastrophes will only be of short duration because they will forget everything again quickly and therefore make an effort to do much rebuilding. Wait for it, because they are already creating phantasmagoria through movies and television, as well as later through a worldwide netting of computers and electronics through which they deceive themselves and see things that do not exist and are only visually determined for the eye. Subsequently, their sense for reality disappears and they can no longer distinguish between reality and fiction. Really? Whereby they lose themselves more and more in the labyrinth of life, while those who produce phantasms commercially, as well as religious and sectarian phantasms, have an easy game with the people of faith, who they deceive in every possible manner and make them into humble beings, like cringing dogs. Well, okay, I mean, that's pretty serious stuff here. And that's from Billy Meier. So it would seem like with Putin likened all of this stuff that's going on with this gender nonsense, quite frankly, to a total phantasmagoria or dreamlike fantasy. It's just kind of nice when you see a word that is so infrequently used that it being used accurately by Billy Meier, of course, and Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin, there he is, wherever he may be. And hopefully not too long, he will have some form of weather returning in his country as well. I don't know if it goes in the same way. Like, it probably does. If it's going to be the West Coast at a certain time, then it's an hour later, for the mountain time, I think it is, and then you get the central time. Okay, so anyway, we had another bit of news that I had noted in my blog today, simply about children and COVID and the BBC being wrong and Meier being right. This is a rather kind of unpleasant thing to even have to talk about. I'm not going to talk about it at great length. Here's the thing. For some time, and including since the beginning of the pandemic, there was a great and confident kind of attitude among authorities and medical professionals that children were going to basically be immune from this and are not going to be affected. Now, if you remember the early warnings from Billy Meier about this, they said that indeed, initially, children wouldn't be affected, but they would be some of the most prolific, widespreading spreaders of the disease, hidden spreaders. It would not be recognized that children were spreading this disease because they were not manifesting symptoms to it. We have that online COVID test. You can go and look that up on the blog at theyflyblog.com. And when you do, you're going to see just how much information that Meier has provided for publication, and we and others have published, has been absolutely accurate. So now there were a couple headlines in the news. The one that came up about 5-6 days ago was more than 320,000 children diagnosed with COVID-19 in the US in the past 2 weeks. Wow. But there's another one. And that was a paragraph that said, or a sentence that said, as of October 14th, nearly 6.2 million children have tested positive for COVID-19 since the onset of the pandemic. Could Meier have been any more accurate? Well, yes, because they've also talked about the fatalities and what's going to happen to children and lingering diseases and a lot of unpleasant stuff. So we're not here to bang away relentlessly on COVID and vaccinations. There's enough unpleasant information about that, and people have to still, of course, make up their own mind and decide what they are going to do, if they're going to do anything about anything, and all the rest of it. So these were a couple of the items that I wanted to kind of get out of the way. They're in the news, and some of this will remain in the news for a very long time, and of course, compound the things pertaining not just to Putin's attitude about transgenderism and all of this woke culture, absolute nonsense, people with too much time on their hands, but especially the threats that are posed to his country that he's well aware of, and that Meier has spelled out, and that indeed spelled out before there were any news items whatsoever about the developments whereby the West, the US, NATO and all, were bringing troops and armaments into areas bordering Russia. So what are we to make of all this? Well, what we can make of it is that it's life as usual in these new times on Earth. It's like people have said, well, we've entered the new time, new age, new time. And unfortunately, it's going to be, at least for a while, like the old time on steroids. It's just going to be a massive increase in the intensity, if you will, of all those things that we're hoping, are supposed to be moving out of here, right? We're supposed to be in the happy new age, except we know all too well from the extensive prophecies and predictions from Billy Meier and his teachers and associates that what we're going to be looking at for some time to come is a massive breakdown on every level of society. The climate and, if you will, environmental and climate breakdown is a given. And while people who are environmentalists and who are well-intended, are trying to, promote green energy and this, that, and the other thing, it was been spelled out so thoroughly by Meyer how it's whistling in the dark. And it was almost like, I thought, was he just being cynical here? But the more I read, there's a one document, something like 20 something pages on the reality of the environmental destruction. And Meyer says in there, well, people don't understand that just the idea of electric, cars, electric vehicles is not an answer in itself, because it requires even more production and manufacture and many more things like batteries, which have their own problems in terms of the way they contribute to pollution. And it went on and on and on by his being logical and saying, well, you see, if you're going to do this, we were talking the law of cause and effect here, if anybody is at all doubtful about it. If you start to do this, this creates that effect. And people haven't thought about that. They think you can keep band-aiding these things when the underlying issue, overpopulation, can't be spoken about rationally, because people think you want to euthanize everybody. And you don't, but people are overbreeding so drastically that we're euthanizing ourselves. The extent of the rational, logical, factually based information on the real challenge and the real danger, the real danger to the environment, you have never read anything like it. And if you go to the blog, if you go to theyflyblog.com, you can start to get a taste, if you will, of the realities behind this simply by searching for terms like environmental and what have you. What I'm looking to do tonight too, I want to actually talk about a personal experience, a bit of, a personal relationship to something in the creation energy teaching, in the spiritual teaching. And I've got it ready, but I'm going to kind of lead up to it in a way. And that it's going to be the thing that I was talking about today, or put in the blog. I was talking to some people, to be righteous or to be wrongtious. Now, of course, I don't know if there is such a word as wrongtious, but I kind of think there should be a word such as wrongtious, because we have a word such as righteous, right? So this whole thing of righteous and wrongtious and all the rest of it, we read these things, sometimes we read them just at the best possible time, when seemingly coincidentally, we are in the midst of something. Now, I think it's only fair that I say we will take calls. And if you call in, give me a moment to catch up, and then I'll pause and we'll have something that can be discussed. As a matter of fact, I just got, I got a question that was emailed in, and I'm going to address it. And I'll give you the phone number here, which is 831-479-1080. Now, this is a question from Andrew, and I think I actually answered this on a program that perhaps Andrew didn't hear, but I'm going to answer it again. I think my answer is going to be pretty similar on it, because it's the only truthful answer I have. So here's the question that Andrew had posed. He said, are there any recommendations on how to prepare ourselves and our families for these new age times that truthfully are more like old age times on steroids? That's great. So I guess he heard what I was saying, or maybe that was his question originally, and I'm just catching up. So excuse me while I take a drink of H2. Oh, so yeah, Andrew, here's how I look at that. This, and I think this is what I said the last time, and I wasn't trying to be glib or dismissive. You say, are there any recommendations on how to prepare ourselves and our families, for these bizarre times that we're already kind of in? Yes, The creation energy teaching itself, the spiritual teaching, if you will, is the preparation, is the companion, the ongoing companion to our being able to learn how to navigate these times and future times. And the strange aspect of this teaching to me is its timeliness, no matter where you open to it. And this brings me, to what I'm going to say about my personal experience, but I'm not being dismissive of your question here. You see, when we start to read the creation energy teaching, we see there are certain foundational principles. There's actually a good number of them, but some of them are that we, first of all, are 100% responsible for ourselves, for what we do in and with our lives. And that's a tall order. But remember, Meier has said here, the way he puts it, the human being is the forger or the smith of their own destiny. Well, okay, well, but what about this and what about that? And what? But you see, this is an invitation for us to come into this and to go, let's look a little more. What is he talking about? And I don't mean that everything is in the sequence that I'm expressing it, but it's all there. We are invited to see things as they really are, not as we want them to be, or as we fear that they may be. First, we should see things as they are, be able to assess, to be in reality. And from that place of clarity, as much as we can have that clarity, we then, if we know that we are meant to learn to control our thoughts, we formulate our thoughts. We create thoughts and thinking that is going to bring us a preferred result. That means if we see things as they are, when I say that means among the things it can mean, when we see things that we don't prefer, when things are very bad, and that can be pretty objective of, earthquake and this and that, we don't band-aid it. We see it for what it is, but then we can, and we do, start to think in a balanced, equalized, positive, neutral, positive, if you will, use all these terms, manner whereby we are choosing consciously a course of action, a direction, and we are staying in tune with the inner inspiration, intuition, that which comes from the inner wisdom, the inner teacher, whatever you want to call it. So when we are trying to navigate this crazy time, the spiritual teaching, literally wherever you open, because it's a non-belief based teaching, it's instructional, but it requires that we think it through. Not that we go, oh, the book said this, the book said that. This isn't a religion. It's not a belief system. It's not like, well, if you just believe this and just say these words over and over, everything's going to be okay. No, it's about how do we discern the situation? Well, what do we draw on it? How do we draw on it from within ourselves, from outside resources? But it is through the familiarization with the teaching and the repetitive aspect. It's a repetitive aspect in this teaching, there's no doubt about it. Because repetition is how do they say it? The mother of learning or whatever. It is through repetition that we learn. We don't generally get one thing, and especially if we're doing a study, we'd never have that thing introduced again because we wouldn't remember everything. So and one of the things that happens when you start to read Meier's books, which are fantastic, you want to keep reading. You want to just read the whole thing, but it's said not to do that. Read a sentence, read a few sentences or a paragraph and think about it. Don't be in a hurry to digest it all, sentence and paragraph upon each other, and think that you're going to successfully do it. Now, some people can absorb more in a single sitting, if you will, than others, and that's fine. But don't fall prey to the hunger to read the whole thing through and think that that's the study. Look, I'm among the people, and I'm sure many people that are that listen to this, we do that at times. We just want to know more, but we go back. We go, where was that? Where did I start here? Okay. Oh, really? Is that what it said? How come I don't remember that? Or how come it seems different to me now? So again, to return to what Andrew's asking, this is the process of how we do this. Because remember here, our intention in these times, of course, is to maximize our study, our absorption of the teaching, our practice, our implementation. This is one lifetime. Now, I'm not going to tell you that I can prove that we have countless numbers of lifetimes. So it is part of this teaching. Certainly, there are other, let's say, teachings or systems, what have you, that espouse the same thing. But the fact of the matter is, to be honest about it, we can't prove that right now. So it's best to live this one in the best possible way. I actually think I had a quote here that I came up with. Someone reminded me, I said, really? Did I say that? They said, yeah, so here it is. We are here now to live the best life we can in accordance and harmony with the creation energy teaching. Should be probably in accordance with, and oh, that works, okay. If we can do that, then this life is successful. It's kind of like people will, how we want to challenge things. And they said, well, if you do that, this life is successful. It's like I've said to people many times, if you want to be wealthy, look around and see if you have what you need. If you have what you need, you're really wealthy. You may not have all your desires met, and some people have, recognize that what they have is what they want, and what they want is what they have. But, that's, I guess, take it, what's his name there? Anthony's going to remind me of a Rolling Stone song or something. But that's fine. What we're really trying to do here is to say, look, when we live in this kind of a certainty, love certainty about things, and when we live in an active way, it doesn't mean that everything's going to flow perfectly. More will over time than won't, I think. That's my experience. And we have these periods where things happen. It's just like, oh, but I'm studying the spiritual teaching, the creation. How could this happen to me? And it's because it's real life. And the teaching exists because real life is going to bring these, old age times on steroids that Andrew here, paraphrases or creates the term for. So there's no one thing. We could say, well, welcome change and learn to do. It's about learning to control our thought. Well, before we have to realize we're thinking. Many people don't know that they're thinking 24/7. Thinking, what am I thinking about? Am I thinking? So we try to stay, no matter how active externally, we are trying to maintain an awareness, an inner awareness, and a consciousness of what we are thinking, even if we are animated, if we're in motion about stuff, if we are seemingly in our ego, personality, what have you, the observer part of us can be very active. It takes the discipline to know what you're doing, that you're doing, what you're thinking, that you're thinking. So this is where, maybe go and open the books, take one of the books you have, open it up anywhere and go and start to read what you've got there. Or go somewhere where there's something you want to read and read it. And contemplate it and think about it. And let your study bring to you a certainty on another level about existence. Life is not set up to punish us. That's religion. Probably politics too, but certainly religion, guilt, punishment. That doesn't exist here. Since we are the smiths of our own destiny, and since cause and effect is that immutable law of the universe, and we're thinking all the time, that means we're causing through thoughts, we're causing feelings and actions or inactions. That means that we, the smiths of our own destiny, are always experiencing some aspect of effect of our thinking, of our feeling. I don't want to overdo this, because I think if you crack open the book, so to speak, and it's fine, I mean, challenge and question, but go to that study with a kind of a neutral mind. It's not with this is supposed to do something for me, fix me, make my life perfect, or it's about, don't bring anything if you can, or if you know you're bringing stuff, then go, okay, I'm bringing stuff, but let's keep coming back here and put that other stuff off to the side. All right. So I hope that's just these are my perspectives. I'm not the expert on the spiritual teaching. Nobody is. I mean, I think we could say Meier is. We become expert in terms of the moments in our life as things that we are studying and learning, as we are applying them, and as they seem to deliver into our life awakening and awareness, and the kind of, not the political woke that angry people are involved in, but the kind of grateful awareness that that we have then for our existence. That's what I get excited about, that stuff. So in terms of this creation energy teaching, which we seem to be talking about somewhat, to be righteous or wrongous, well, I know that I'm not alone in the way life throws the curveballs, the way things take you up and the way things drop you down, and how seemingly unfair some things can be as well. And I happen to have been recalling a situation with someone where in a filmmaking business, where I'd known the person decades, literally trusted them and all that. They wanted to make another film. And I said, fine. And I said, so, send me an agreement. Well, don't worry, I'll get to that. We're real good. And normally that's a red flag for me, but I know the person. I thought, well, okay, let it be at that. And we arranged to go and shoot the film and all this. And then afterwards, the bottom line on it was that they went ahead. I mean, it shocked me. And they took the thing and did with it what they wanted and released it without any agreement or approval or authorization on my part. Now, for people who make things, let's say intellectual property, they call things like music, films and all, or physical things. If somebody, especially if it's somebody you know and have no reason really to distrust, takes something of yours and exploits it in the most underhanded possible way, I don't know about you, but I don't take kindly to that. And in that situation, I experienced some tremendously angry feelings, to put it mildly. And every conceivable vindictive and angry and vengeful kind of a thought was, I'll put it this way, was crossing the screen of my mind. Now, I know better than to want to carry out or carry through that type of thing in any way, no matter what. And I struggled through, for a couple of days, I struggled through how to deal with that, and came to some determinations about legal options and trying to reason with a person and all this. But what was so interesting about this, when I say to you, open one of Meier's books. So I got through a couple brutal days and nights. I was processing my thoughts and feelings for an hour to 2 hours a night. I would wake up generally somewhere between 1 and 3 in the morning, and I would be awake for an hour to 2 hours, lying there, cranking this, following the thought, following where the emotion and feeling the thing was, focusing, breathing, the whole thing. I mean, I try to practice the things that I create too. So it got me to an interesting place where I thought, well, I take this step or that step, but I don't have an energy, an emotional energy on it. I see things about a human being that I haven't seen before, that I am very disappointed in. I think they, the character flaws and blah, 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 and all the things one could say, but I'm not here to pass those descriptions or judgments. Everybody's afraid of judgments. Well, if somebody steals from you and it's real, you can say, well, I think they're a thief. Okay, but that isn't as important as getting to a place of enough neutrality whereby I could try to do some reasoning to find out what was possible with the person and not be attached to what their response or lack of response was. So without getting into too much more, it just so happened that somebody was looking for a link to the Om, one of the books that Meier wrote, believe it or not, Standing Up, a monster book, just a crazy thing. Okay, and they found an article on my website, theyfly.com, not my blog, theyflyblog.com, my website. And they said, hey, this link isn't going to the article on the Om that I wanted to see. And I said, oh gosh, I think this is what happened. There's so many things with the spiritual teaching there. And I said, well, let me try and find it out. Well, to make this the point here, somehow I came upon, I was scrolling, trying to find, and I find this sentence. Listen to this. The unrighteous person torments and kills his fellow men through punishment. Yeah. But the wise person is mild and forbearing, and therefore patient, however, always admonishing to the fallible and guilty. Therefore, he or she is the stricter. And that there's a lot there. And I took it in on, just read it a couple of times, but even reading it now, I'm going, ooh, yeah, that's pretty deep. It was like I just had gone through this whole thing, and here I happened accidentally to fall upon this mind-bogglingly beautiful viewing from above and not from below advice, recommendation, perspective on dealing with fellow men. And obviously they're talking about here, you're dealing with people who are fallible and guilty, but instead of tormenting and killing them through punishment and vindictiveness, etc., we're told to be forbearing and patient. Now, I was talking to my friend earlier today, another person, and I was talking about this very thing. And I said, think about it. It's really amazing, because in our world today, all you have to do, whether it's online or anything else, you open it up and there are all of these examples of people who could not go there, they didn't even pause to consider it. They grabbed a gun or a knife for their car, and it's mayhem because of the way we perceived hurts, affronts, whatever. And if only we lived in a world, this is why this teaching is so potent and so beautiful and so important. And I really, really want people to discover that, the books, Meier's books, and I should have books and commercial things here and all that, but I just talk about it, and anybody wants it, you go to theyflyblog.com, you can find all this stuff. Now, there was something else in the news. There's a man named Dennis Prager. He's a radio show guy. I met him 25 years ago or so. I called into his show about the Meier case a couple of times, and I still have my audio tapes on that. I think I called him in 1995. Very above it all and dismissive and all this stuff. So he's a conservative guy, a highly religious guy, seemingly very intelligent guy. So he just made the news again because he contracted COVID. And he was crowing about it. This is what I set out to do, he says, because this is no big deal disease. Heck, I hugged thousands of people. until I got this thing, and that's what I set out to do. I was hugging people and around, and people were reporting on this. But one thing I didn't notice that anybody said, what about all the people that you might have exposed to this disease who didn't know that at that point you may have just been an asymptomatic carrier and you had it and you were spreading? You interacted with thousands of people and you've got this disease, and other people, everybody's immune system responds differently. This is when people are seemingly intelligent and arrogant as hell, but that intelligent isn't an intelligence of consciousness and consequence. It's an intelligence that is based in a partisan political thinking, in some form of a fundamentalist view of religion, in a sense of superiority over people, of being a teacher and a lecturer, what have you. So here's an idiot, a guy who's navigated all these years of his life and now goes out, he's got it. Who knows how many other people he's gifted with this? So let's be careful. By the way, with Putin talking about the transgenderism and everything, I think I should bring up, you were talking Eastern Europe and all that. I have a bullet point that I was going to mention, and it's not a big discussion. And the bullet point is how a benevolent ruler reigned in a politically correct region centuries ago. Well, we're talking about transgenders. Didn't anybody ever hear of Transylvania? That was a whole place in Romania. It's obviously centuries ago, 1400s, whatever. They named a whole area, Transylvania, like Pennsylvania. So I would think that there's a tradition there that must have carried on for a long time. I think they had a benevolent ruler of some form. I think his name was Vlad, if memory serves me correctly. Some dicey stuff in the history there, maybe, some bloody stuff, but that's history, isn't it? So I would just say that a lot of the people that get so upset with, political correctness, Transylvania, it's there. When you can visit again, or maybe get some brochures, maybe they've learned how to cope with this whole thing with the so-called gender issue, which has never been an issue to people with working brain cells. Now, by the way, I want to say something. That doesn't mean that people do not have pushes and pulls and other identifications where they're not attracted to the opposite sex, or they feel that they are the opposite sex, that they're in the wrong body. These are real things. And that is not to pick on or criticize people who deal with these things in whatever ways they deal with them. It's just that we cannot politicize things, our plumbing. It's not to be done. Meier said it, to be of equal value. If we, the rest of the world, as well as people who are, let's say, not living the so-called norm, it doesn't mean you annihilate that there are males and females, but if you're not living that norm and you're struggling or not struggling with it, if you're happy, whatever, it's just like, don't politicize everything. This is tearing the country apart so crazily, and this is contributing to it. So I have a little time here for Future Self and how to use it. Future Self is a book I wrote. It was based on an experience of 2 or 3 or 20 that I had beginning in 1972. So I'm going to motor mouth it a little bit because I think some people maybe have already heard this or can easily, find it. There's no real problem with finding this in my blog and all that. Future Self, 1972, I'm living in Venice. I'm a songwriter. I have a, blue-lined yellow pad. I'm ready to write because I think, oh, we're getting a call. Well, let's go there because we'll pick this up. And who might be on the line tonight? Caller? Hello, anybody home? Waiting to hear a voice. Liliana from Los Angeles, lots of L's right there. So let's hear what Lady Liliana would like to say. how to handle the situation of the polarization of vaccinated and unvaccinated. It's very difficult. I don't think there's an immediate, easy answer. And so, well, I'll tell you what happened. People have asked me this as well. We ask each other questions. I'm not the authority on, what do you do? It's just like, well, what do you do? What do you think? Well, I come back to the idea of the spiritual teaching. And why? Because we are getting really the answers in our lives from within. But this teaching is the activator. It is it blows on the embers. It enriches, it brings vastness, but it also is, in my opinion, my experience, it is that which brings alive the inner knowing, and it brings in knowing that then enriches the inner knowing, if you can follow that. What I'm trying to say is this: we take the question to ourselves. Now, we also can, randomly go through books and see if something strikes us, but we ultimately have to take the question to ourselves and go, okay, now if we're speaking on a very directly personal level, such as, I've been told I've got to get this vaccination or I'm going to lose my job. Now, I actually asked one person that told me this. I said, well, what's the most important thing in the world to you? And they said, my life. And I said, well, there's your answer, in my opinion. Now, you have to extrapolate more about how do you protect your life. But we do have to know what our priorities are. There are people certainly who have some choice, but they're feeling forced or all the rest of it. And there's people who are presented with no choice. So someone says, well, it's easy for you to say, you're not about to, you don't even have a job you can, be fired from. And here's the interesting thing to me, and I'll just say this, and I hope this makes sense. I never really had a job in my life, nothing that lasted more than 2 months. So I had to always reinvent myself, and things ended suddenly for other reasons. All sorts of stuff. I ended up being homeless in New York City in the late 60s, 69, 70. And the weird thing was, I had no background for dealing with that, but I just thought, because of something that had happened before the homelessness, I thought, this is an adventure. And I see all these people in New York City, there's been for the longest time, lots of people in the streets. And I said, this is for me temporary. And many of these people will be here for the rest of their lives. So I'm going to follow. There seems to be something for, literally, I did it. I would think of a place, I would go there. Or any kind of an inspiration to look at something, to talk to somebody. I just did it. And I found myself led. I'd like to, in a subsequent show, I want to say more about this. I know there's another call on the line too. And by the way, there is a lot more to say about that, but this is where we find out, can we create that miracle of survival? We might be stepping out of a boat. We're trying to get our foot to the dock. We end up in the water, but there's a ladder, and it's just going to take us a little time to climb out. So there is more to be said about this, quite a bit. And the things that happened to me just make me homeless, and the things that brought me out of it, it's a story I do want to tell. I haven't told a lot of my own personal life stuff simply because I'm really interested in bringing the Meier material forward, but it's something that's changed my life. So that's what I could say right now, Liliana, because I want to see if I can possibly address another subject. And so thank you, if I may say that, and we will speak again, I'm sure. We have Brigitte from Austin, Texas. And let's hear what Brigitte is bringing to the table tonight. Hi, Brigitte. Oh, I'm fine. I'm glad that people are calling in and we can discuss things. It's not that I'm the answer box, but we can certainly discuss stuff. What's on your mind? Oh, my little book. Sure. Well, sure, sure. Let me try. I make no pretenses that what I am doing or what I write is comparable to the creation energy teaching. Although there are things, I mean, like in the process that I created the consciousness awareness workshop, formerly called Standing in Spirit, Meier, when I asked him, he said, "No, teach that. It's compatible and consistent with the spiritual teaching." So here's what about the future self, because I won't have time to describe the whole thing, but it's a means by which you communicate through technology with yourself. You become, in that process, you own being your own highest authority. And, there were things to talk about, which I'll do in another show about it, but it isn't that you are suddenly, Brigitte is going to turn into, Astarama from planet Venus when she does it. It's about, you will question yourself, you will answer yourself, and you do it with either a phone or a tablet or a computer in a very specific way, whereby every day you have this living diary and you can change components of it. You will find out what resources you need, for whatever goals you choose. If you're choosing to change a goal, all of this is built in so that you, the person using it, is the one consciously making the decision. So to answer your question, I would say, and I created it long before I knew this teaching, I would say it's a kind of interesting little technology that absolutely emphasizes and supports the idea that you are responsible for your own life, that you are the smith of your destiny, that you bring forward the answers. It's not that we don't get all sorts of input and help from other human beings in life, but we are here to extract the wisdom as well that we have and to increase it. So if you get, this is a $10 little book which spells out the steps and tells how it came into being. And you could even say, let me say it, it's like a gimmick. What I mean, it's a little tool. You use this, you play with it, and you can change it around. And when you get it fully, then you don't even need necessarily to do the process, but it's one of those things you might enjoy playing with. So I think that we're fast approaching time running out tonight. And I thank those of you who've called in. I hope the rest of the show was of value. I want you to, of course, to stay safe and to say salome to all. And I want to thank Dave and Robert and everybody at KSCO and all who have made this possible for us. So yes, stay safe, stay serene. Why not? You've got a choice. So in the midst of all this crazy, let us find our serenity. Let us find our gratitude. Let's have a salome within and without. So I'll grin at you here until this mic is turned off. And we will hopefully see you all next week with some more stuff. And I'm going to elaborate more on future self and what brought it about. Thanks, everybody. Thank you.